Welcome to another live stream. It is Wednesday, April 30th, 2025. Sorry for the brief delay. I'm not sure what was going on. I was having a little trouble with YouTube. Wasn't letting me start this stream. Not sure why. Anyways, we are back. It's been a few days and glad to do some more streaming. I retitled the stream. It's different than it usually is. So I titled this one, I oppose Trump and the left want to debate it. Or want to debate me. I take live calls, link, phone number in the description. I thought that might generate some more interest. Maybe that would make some people want to call in. So just wanted to experiment with a different type of title. Usually I have a default title, chat/debate with an Ayn Rand fan, but I don't have anything more specific about like what people might want to debate. So I thought if I put something in the title more specific of topics that I might be up for debating, maybe that would get some more people to check out the stream. I've seen some other people who do live streams do that kind of thing in the title. So, so we'll see what happens. Oh, we got to see the first chat from Luuk Zwart. He asks, are you doing these live streams every week? Yes, actually, I'm doing them twice a week. I've been doing them on Wednesdays and Saturdays in the afternoon. The exact time varies a bit, but usually around this time on Wednesdays and Saturdays. So right now it's 2:05 Pacific time, and if you're subscribed, then you'll get and you click that bell for notifications, you can get an exact notification of when I go live. I like to have a little flexibility. So I don't announce an exact time. Maybe I'll do that in the future, but for now, I just give a general time, like Wednesday and Saturday afternoons, roughly around this time, like 1 or 2 p.m. Pacific, but it varies a bit. So if you're subscribed, you'll get a notification. Exactly. Well, thanks for coming by, Luke. I recognize your name. I think I've maybe seen a comment from you on previous videos of mine, but I think this is the first time I've seen you in the live chat. I've had some Europeans coming by, but they're maybe 7 or 8 hours ahead of me. So it's I guess it might be harder for them to show up the later I do it here. But maybe earlier is or later is in the day is better for people in the US. So I might play around with the time and see what kind of different audiences I get. Luke asks, why are you doing the live streams? What are you out to gain from it? Well, I'm trying to spread good ideas, in particular Ayn Rand's ideas. As you may know, if you're a follower of the channel, I aim to promote the philosophy of Ayn Rand, Objectivism, and live stream is just another way of doing that. So I've published pre-recorded videos for many years, over 5 years, but I wanted a way to engage with people more. So I thought live streaming would be a way to do that. So when I live stream, I can have chats like I'm doing right now with you, and I can take live questions, and I also take live phone calls. I have it in the chat. I have there's a link to Zoom if anyone wants to call in. I also put it in the description. Just click on that link and that'll get you into the Zoom call, or at least into the waiting room on Zoom, and then I can let you in. Or there's a phone number you can call, which is also in the chat and the description. So it's just a way for me to engage more with people and increase the engagement. Some people might come by for live streams who might not watch pre-recorded videos because they know if they go to a live stream, they can get more engagement. Um, so there are certain advantages to it. And if you want to see some of my past live streams, you can just click on the live tab on my YouTube channel. And this is, I think, live stream number 18. So I started this almost 2 months ago, early March, and I've been doing it ever since. And I still do put out pre-recorded videos from time to time, but not as often as I live stream. All right. It's all about what I've been reading. I spend a lot of time reading when I'm not live streaming, doing research, especially on history. So maybe I'll do a little update on that in a minute. But I welcome anyone who's here watching to raise topics, raise questions, and I'll give that priority because as I said, I want to engage with people. So if you have any questions or comments you want to make in the chat, just feel free to put them in there, and then I'll respond to them when I see them. It looks like I might be having some uh, internet difficulties here because I see some messages in my chat that says chat disconnected. Please wait while we try to reconnect you. And then it says successfully connected. So I guess it's back and running, but that's the second time I've seen that happen this stream. So um, hopefully it's not going to be an ongoing problem. If if it is, maybe I'll try switching from Wi-Fi to using my phone as a hotspot. Maybe that'll be a better connection. Uh, so we'll see. S Okay, so s- since I don't see any other chats here right now, let me give you a little update on what I've been reading. I went back to medieval England. So I've been reading through the kings of medieval England, as you might recall, if you've been tuning into past live streams. This is part of my general study of history. I like to study history a lot. And I was up to King John, who was the king of England from 1199 to 1216. And he's the one who signed the Magna Carta in 1215, or at least the first version of the Magna Carta. This is something that I learned recently. There were reissues of it with some changes over the years, and I've started to read a little about that. So this was a document, a kind of agreement between the king and the aristocracy, or the barons, the noblemen of the time. They had various complaints, I think, like being taxed for maybe wars that the king was fighting, King John was fighting, I think, with France maybe. And they came to an agreement in this document, the Magna Carta, which put some kind of limits on the power of the king. he wasn't as free to, I think, tax, for instance, as he was previously. So I think he had to get more consent from the people he was governing, at least the aristocrats. And I guess that was a lot of people see this as a step in the direction of a constitutionally limited sort of government instead of just a king arbitrarily wielding power over others. But the agreement wasn't stuck to. It didn't last. It was there was a war between the kings and the barons. I think shortly after the Magna Carta was signed. I don't think either side actually stuck to the agreement. So they continued fighting, but then eventually a new version of the agreement was issued, and that's what I've been reading about lately. Um, King Jong died the next year in 1216, and then his son, I believe it was his son, Henry III, was the next king of England. And I'm in the middle of the article on Henry III. Okay, now, much more recently, I've been reading about January 6th, the attack on the Capitol, from 4 years ago now, over 4 years ago. That came up in the last live stream, and I talked about that towards the beginning. In particular, I was talking about Trump's tweets on the day of January 6th. So I wanted to know more about the timeline of what happened when, because I saw on a forum that I'm a member of, Harry Binswanger's forum. He's an objectivist philosopher, for anyone who doesn't know, and he has a forum called hbletter.com. That's the website. There's a paid subscription to become a member, but you can do a free trial. Anyways, there were some posts on that about Trump and January 6th, and there were some claims made about what Trump tweeted when, which didn't sound right to me when I first read the posts. So I wanted to research it some and find out more about it. And then I reported on my research in the last stream. So if you want to check that out, just go to the last live stream. And I want to continue learning about January 6th, not just the Trump's tweets on that day, but more broadly about the events of that day, which I didn't follow very, very closely when it happens. Just I I watched a little of the footage of the rioters attacking the Capitol, um, but I didn't spend much time reading about it or looking into it. But it was a major event in the world, in the U.S. at least, and in U.S. history. And I think it's very important to understand. I mean, at least if you're in certain lines of work, if you want to be able to comment on current events, which I want to be able to do, at least to a certain extent, I want to be able to comment more about current events. And I haven't really followed current events closely for a long time, but since I've started my YouTube channel, started to follow a little bit more. And since I've started my live stream, part of my YouTube channel, I think that's encouraged me to learn even more about current events because I think that's a way I can engage with people, which is a big part of my purpose here. So if that's what's on people's minds, things that are going on in the culture, and those are the kinds of things that people want to call in and talk about, then it's going to be helpful for me to know something about them. We don't only have to talk about current events, right? We can talk about more timeless issues like basic issues in ethics or philosophy, but I also want to be able to comment more on current events. So that's encouraged me to learn more about them. So I've been spending some more time on that recently, and in particular, the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Or it's also partly dependent on what people bring up in chat. Like there was someone in chats a few live streams ago who was talking a lot about Israel and the war in Gaza. So in order to engage with that person, I had to learn, or at least more than I knew some. I mean, I've researched Israel in the past, but to engage at a higher level where I know more of the details about what has happened, um, I wanted to research it more. So that's another thing I've been researching recently. So it's partly dependent on what you all bring up in the chat. All right, I see a couple more messages here in the chat. I see one from Hree 100, who was in the last live stream and actually called in. And my call with him, Christo, is the name. That was his name on Zoom. It's different in the chat here. But Christo called in from Bulgaria, and we did a live call. And what he says here in the chat today, he says, "I'm not familiar with U.S. politics, but I know this much: Orange Man bad." Okay. Um, yeah, Orange Man. That's what a lot of people call Donald Trump. And I guess that's this phrase "Orange Man bad" is often used by people who want to criticize people who are criticizing Trump as if it's just like a mindless, unthinking, um, idiotic kind of knee-jerk reaction. At least this is how it seems I've heard the term used. Like if people don't have a rational criticism of Trump, all they can say is "Orange Man bad" in a kind of caveman grammar with no verbs, um, just adjective, noun, adjective. Um, but I think it could just be a smear sometimes, like TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. I think that's often used as a smear of people who have legitimate or thought through criticisms of Trump. Some of Trump's supporters um, might say, "Oh, you just have TDS." Um, so I think Orange Man bad might be another one of those phrases that's often used as a smear. And we got a ghosty in here. Hi, a ghosty. He says, "Hi, Dan. I was glad to see James Valiant's Facebook post saying Leonard Peikoff has soured on Trump." Yeah, I saw that. That was, what, a day or two ago? There was, in one of the Facebook groups, James Valiant posted a update saying that Leonard Peikoff had soured on Trump. Yeah, that's, I guess, I would say that's movement in the right direction. I've been sour on Trump for a long time. Um, and I guess it was partly to do with Ukraine. I don't remember exactly the reasons he soured. Maybe I can look it up, and or you can post in the chat. Let me see if I can find it here. I think it was in the Leonard Peikoff Study and Appreciation Group. It's called something like that. Yeah, okay, found the group. Oh, it has a AI now. I see. I just clicked on the group and uh, a message popped up that says Peikoff Pal. This group's AI is here to help. So Peikoff Pal is now An AI tool? Interesting. Okay. So I don't know how many posts I need to scroll down here to find it. Oh, here it is. I just found it. Why it says February 20th? Maybe I guess I'm looking at the, is this the wrong date? Um, or maybe there was just a similar post. Okay, I found the one. Yeah, this one's, it says yesterday at 7:30 a.m. So that would have been April 29th, 2025, 7:30 a.m. My time, at least. I guess it's on my time. So the post says from Jim Valiant, it says Leonard Peikoff has soured, and soured is in quotes. Leonard Peikoff has soured on Trump officially and says he would not have written about him as he did had he known what we now do. That's the end of the quote. So it was a short post. It was just one sentence. Um, but I guess the Ukraine thing, maybe I was remembering a different post because I see also just on the same group, it says this is from February 20th of this year. Another post from Jim Valiant, also one sentence long. It says, quote, "For the record, Leonard Peikoff is morally outraged at Trump's Ukraine policy, strongly opposes the appointment of RFK, and opposes tariffs against any country other than China," unquote. Okay, so that goes into some of Peikoff's reasons for opposing Trump, but I maybe there was something more recent that led Valiant to post again. I'm not sure, but maybe if I go into the comments, there will be some more details. Don't know if I want to do that right now, though. Oh, AGOSTI says the tariffs, I think. I guess that's maybe the reason that Peikoff has soured recently. And then Hree says in the chat, I can bring three examples why Trump is not very bright, but I will use the most recent one I know about. The tariffs that he established is only bad for the US and the West overall economy. Okay, so that's what Hree says in the chat. Let's get some water here. So tariffs, that's certainly one reason I'm critical of Trump. And I think it's bad for everyone, at least in the long run. I guess you could, if you're protected by tariffs, if you're some industry like the steel industry, you might get some short run benefit if a tariff is passed on steel imports because now you don't have your competition is weaker. They're not going to be able to sell as much if people have to pay higher for imported steel due to tariffs. So you might face less competition if you're a domestic producer. But in the long run, I don't think it's good for anyone. Um, so this is one of the lessons of Henry Hazlitt's book, Economics in One Lesson, which I think is a good book. I've read half of it. I haven't. I'd like to read the whole thing, but many years ago, I think I read about half of the book, and one of the main lessons is if you look at the long run consequences of e- various economic policies and don't just consider the immediate or short run consequences, then you can evaluate them more appropriately and see that government intervention is not a good thing. Okay. All right. Looks like there's 153 comments on that post yesterday from Jim Valiant. So maybe there's some discussion in there. Gets into more details. Valiant says in one of his comments under that post, he says, he, meaning Leonard Peikoff, gave me very explicit permission to make this public. Okay. So, tariffs, I haven't talked much about that on my channel. Talked a little about it, but I haven't researched it much or thought about it much. So as I mentioned, January 6th is something I've been researching more recently, the last couple days in particular. So I've been reading the Wikipedia article on the January 6th attack, and I am close to the end of it. I might finish it later today, but it's been very interesting. All right, so for anyone who is just joining, welcome. If you like the stream, want to help promote it, I'd appreciate it if you hit the thumbs up. And I appreciate subscriptions. That'll help the channel grow. And if anyone wants to call in, I have a phone line open, or a Zoom line, which is in the chat. And I also put it in the description today. And I'm pretty flexible on what we talk about, even though I put in the title something about uh, I oppose Trump and the left. So I was thinking maybe that would help uh, prompt some people to call in, but it's just kind of clickbait. Is that what they call it? I'm really open to talking about anything, but I just thought that might help get some more people over. But we can talk about anything. So feel free to raise any topics in the chat or call in about anything else. And it can also just be a get to know you kind of chat, and I can carry the conversation. You don't have to feel like you have the burden of carrying the conversation. I can just ask you questions, get to know you. So it can be very relaxed. And we had someone call in last time, or Cristo, who was here in the chat. He called in last time. We had a little call. So feel free to do that. And if you let me know in the YouTube chat that you want to call in, that's a good idea because I might see it sooner there. All right. So I don't see any new chat messages. And maybe what I'll do, like I've done in the past sometimes, when there's not much engagement, is I'll just temporarily turn off my camera and my mic and then come back if I see that there's some engagement in the chat or if someone wants to call in. But I'm not sure. I want to just keep talking because I don't have much material prepared, like a monologue or anything. Um, so uh, I don't know if it's just going to be. I don't know if I want to just do stream of consciousness for an hour or however long the stream goes. I think it might be better to just take a break and wait to see if there's more engagement and then come back. I just got a new chat, so let's see what this is. Hree says, say for example, what Trump should do, in my opinion. Okay, just a second. Well, I think he should resign. Maybe that would be step number one. It's a pretty broad question, like what Trump should do. Maybe you have in mind something more specific, like um, with regard to tariffs, I would say get rid of them. But tariffs is just a one single issue. But given how bad I think Trump is, given, for example, what happened on January 6th and his election denial, his his lies, I think he's told about winning the 2020 election, I think he should resign. I don't think he's fit to be president. I think he's that bad. And he was impeached by the House of Representatives twice, but the Senate did not agree with that. I think the Senate needed to vote with 67 votes, a two-thirds majority, in order to, I guess, have the impeachment take effect and remove him from office. But they didn't get that many votes. I think it was a majority, at least in the second impeachment. He was impeached twice by the House, and in the second impeachment, I think I just read that there were 57 votes to uh, impeach him and 47 votes not to impeach him. So they had a majority, but it wasn't a two-thirds majority. So he wasn't totally removed. Um, but I think that's the right thing for him to do would just be to acknowledge the truth uh, about the 2020 election and resign. Um, so I think it was at the height of the violence on January 6th that he put out a tweet that was even, fan the flames. Um, let me see if I can pull up the tweets. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so at 2:24 local time, East Coast time on January 6th, which I read was like during the thick the height of the violence at the Capitol. He put out a tweet that says Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones, which they were asked to previously certify. USA demands the truth. And that's the end of his tweet. So he's still peddling his election fraud lies right in the middle of the Capitol attack. Um, so it looks like he is inciting, instigating further the attack on the Capitol. Um, so for this kind of thing, probably for other things too, but certainly for this I think he's not fit to be president. So, uh, Okay, just taking another look back here at the chat. Uh, okay, it's like there's not any new messages. Another resource which you can check out, which I recommended a number of times here because I think it's really good, is Yaron Brooks' show. He talks a lot about Trump as well as many other things, but he's talked much more about tariffs, for instance. So if you want to get his take, I think that would be good. Um, all right. Well, thanks for that little prompt in the chat, Hree. Does anyone else want to say hello or make a comment or something? See, we got it says on my phone it says there's 5 people right now. Oh, Hree says maybe my last comment didn't show up. It shows for me it says there's one chat from you that was retracted, but then after that I just saw another one that came in, which I'll read now. It says U.S. election system is very bad, if I understand it correctly. U.S. citizens don't directly vote for who becomes a president. Yeah, we have something called the Electoral College. So the U.S. has like 330 million people in it, but they're represented by a few hundred people in Congress, and I guess depending on how the population in a given state votes, that that will determine. Well, I don't know if it determines like by necessity, but at least typically, I think the way a population in a state votes is how the electors for that state, like the representatives of the state, vote. There is something called a faithless elector, which I think might be a case where even if the population in a state votes it for a certain candidate by majority, maybe the elector doesn't vote in accordance with the majority. Maybe that's what a faithless elector is. I'm not sure, but at least in general, it's they're synced up, and you have to win a certain number of the electoral votes in order to win the presidency. And I haven't really thought about that much, like as to whether that's a good system or not. I'm not sure uh, what the reasoning for it is, but in any case, the U.S. does have a system like that. Um, in there's a difference between the two houses. So that's the U.S. Congress. It's bicameral, so there are two houses. There's the Senate House and then the House of Representatives. And I guess um, one is scaled to the population in terms of size. So the more people in a state there are, the more representatives there are. That's the House of Representatives. Like California has the largest population in the U.S. of all 50 states. So there are more representatives from California than for any other state. But in the Senate House, it's the same for every state. There's only 2 senators for every state, regardless of the size of the population. And I guess some countries they don't have 2 different houses. It's just one house, and maybe there are advantages and disadvantages to that. All right. So Sheree says, just my opinion. Okay. Wonder what it's like in Bulgaria. You're from Bulgaria, so I have no idea what the Bulgarian system of government is like. I think it was a Eastern Bloc country, I guess, uh, during the days of the Soviet Union, but then around 1989, 90, 91, I guess the Soviet Union fell, and maybe there's a different system of government there now. I don't know, but maybe you can tell us. Okay, so here, okay, here's another chat from Hari. He says, I don't think is good. Just remove the middleman and let people vote straight for president. Just my opinion. Okay, so do away with the electoral college. I think I've heard some people in the US advocate for that kind of view. Um, that would be direct democracy, as opposed to representative democracy, where you have everyone, every individual just directly voting for the president. It might seem impractical, at least in certain cases, to try to have a direct democracy. Maybe it's just too complicated to get many millions of people coordinated to vote for something. So, and also, you might not want to have people who are just totally ignorant casting votes. Instead, you could elect politicians whose job it is to be knowledgeable and about what's going on, and um, instead of just random people. Maybe that's part of the reason it's good to have elected representatives. Then you can outsource uh, some of the work, the task of keeping up with going everything that's going on in the world, or at least in your country, and then having an informed opinion about it so that you know how to vote. Instead, you could outsource that to others. Um, and I guess you want to keep up with it to some extent so you can evaluate, make a choice on whoever you're electing to represent you. But I guess there is a kind of division of labor. Maybe you can be informed to a certain extent, but not as informed as the people you're electing. Just like for any other kind of expert you're considering, like you go to a doctor, um, you're not totally ignorant of how the human body works. I mean, you learn some things in biology class, and you can read up on the internet and um, learn a lot about it yourself, but that's a different level of understanding something than if you go to medical school. Um, so I guess you need some amount of knowledge to evaluate the expert, but um, there are certain things that it's good to have experts for. This was a topic that came up recently on Your On Brooks show in connection with the Joe Rogan's podcast, because he recently had Joe Rogan had Douglas Murray and Dave Smith on to talk about Israel. And one of the main issues that came up in that discussion was the role of experts, and um, whether someone like Dave Smith should be commenting on an issue like Israel, at least on a podcast like Joe Rogan's, given that he's not an expert on that issue. I guess he's a comedian, um, but he has he's read a lot about Israel. But should you have someone like that on a podcast like Joe Rogan's? That was a question that came up, and And there's been other guests on the Joe Rogan podcast, which Douglas Murray was saying he did not think it was good to have on, or at least that was my impression, that he didn't think some of the people that were being platformed on the podcast should have been platformed. So this issue of experts has been getting some attention lately. Uh, Hri says in the chat, in that case, if someone is ignorant, voting is bad. They're still voting for representative. It's still bad in that case too. Um, so um, I guess if you're ignorant of whether someone has any qualifications, then it's not really helping to have someone represent you, or it's not helpful to let people vote for someone to represent them if they have no idea about the qualifications of the people they're voting for. All right. Oh, looks like someone has called in. I just noticed. Okay. The name shows up as Oh Knows 117. Don't recognize that. I didn't see that in the chat. That's why I don't know how long this person has been waiting. Um, but if you want to call in, then it helps to mention it in the chat, because usually I'm looking at the chat first and I only check my Zoom window once in a while. So if you let me know in the chat, I'll probably see sooner that you're trying to call in on Zoom. But all right, so we got a call. So I'm gonna take this. I have no idea who it is. Um, so I don't know what this person wants to talk about, but I will take a risk and find out. Okay, admit. Hello. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, let me turn your volume up a little because it sounds a little low for me. Okay, it looks like I had it turned all the way down, so I got it up now. I should be able to hear you better now. All right, so I see you show up here for me as Oh Knows 117.
Yeah.
Okay, and well, welcome to the show. So what are you interested? Did you have something on your mind in particular you're interested in talking about?
Well, I saw I read the title after I already had my question. Um, I'm sort of a lurker. I mean, I've only seen a few of your stuff, but I'm also an objectivist. And I guess my question to you is, you're definitely more well learned about objectivism than I am. I'm very recent. I've to give you an information. I've read Atlas Shrugged, I've read Fountainhead, I've read Opar, I've watched, Peikoff's entire history of philosophy, a little bit of the induction series, a little bit of he's done something on like the principle of two definitions and or uniting epistemology and ethics or whatever it is. So I have a little bit of a basis, but my question is to you is, are you I have a problem with the closed objectivist position.
Mm.
And I kind of feel like, I guess, first of all, I feel like the closed is completely wrong. And I feel like the objectivists are very quick to uh, deify Ayn Rand. And, objectivisms love heroes. And I feel like Ayn Rand didn't want to create this closed objectivism. The whole closed open happened after she had already passed. And I think the idea of the whole closed system is just leading to, I guess I want to get your advice or your view on it. But to me, it seems like that's how you are going to, you're basically zombifying the entire philosophy. You're saying, oh no, Ayn Rand never said that. So, I mean, I watched an argument where Michael Leibowitz, who's the rational egoist, was talking to another objectivist, name's slipping, but they were talking about values. And the whole time they were saying, like, he's like, wait, are you trying to say objectivism isn't closed? And they were like, whoa, 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 we don't want to say that. It just seems like it's really keeping people behind. And I have the topic you're talking about, politics, I think is one of the places where objectivism is falling behind, because I don't think politics is a branch of philosophy. I think Ayn Rand has a frozen abstraction, and I think the open system of objectivism could, fix that, mediate that. And I just wanted to know your opinion about whether or not objectivism is closed or open, and how you feel about that.
Okay.
Sorry if that was a mouthful.
Yeah, that's fine. No problem. I'm not sure closed and open is the right terms for it, but I do think that objectivism with a capital O is the name of Ayn Rand's philosophy. And that if you add something to that, at least something significant, um, like maybe if you add a new virtue, like if you say that toleration or an alleged virtue, um, this is something that David Kelly, I think, has argued for. He's someone who I think is maybe more than anybody else associated with what's called open objectivism. Um, but I think he's argued that certain virtues, maybe benevolence is another one, um, should be considered like key virtues. Where Ayn Rand lists 7 virtues.
Mm-hmm.
So the ones that she mentions in Atlas Shrugged are rationality, independence, integrity, honesty, justice, productiveness, and pride.
Mm-hmm.
But then I guess Kelly argues that there should be some other virtues on a par with those. I don't know if he exactly puts it in that terms, like on a par, like if he thinks they should be co-equal, but
Well,
um,
rationality has to be the primary, right? No matter what.
well, that's certainly on Ayn Rand's view. Rationality is the
Mhm.
primary virtue, but and all the others are aspects of rationality. They're
Right,
not like
right.
totally separate from it. Um, so maybe Kelly would think that um, benevolence and toleration are virtues on a par with like honesty or integrity. They're not the primary virtue like
Mm-hmm.
rationality, but they are aspects of rationality equally important to the 6 others that Rand mentions. I'm not sure if that's exactly his view, but if that is his view, then I I don't think that would be I don't think it's right to call that objectivism. I think that would be a departure from objectivism, which is a different issue from whether it's true or not. Maybe it's true, maybe it's false, but I think of objectivism with a capital O as being the name of Ayn Rand's philosophy. So if you think Kelly is right, that these are virtues on a par with all the other subsidiary virtues, then okay, but I just wouldn't call that objectivism because it's not um, the system Ayn Rand came up with. So it's kind of like I don't know if what the right term to use is, like not patent or copyright. Maybe plagiarism is a term closer to what I have in mind. But like if you try to pass off someone else's ideas as if they're your own, then I think that's bad. And if you're calling yourself an objectivist or say that you agree with objectivism, yet you include in that things that Ayn Rand did not include, at least if there's something significant like other virtues on a par with honesty, um, then it doesn't seem right to me to call that objectivism. And I think it's partly just an issue of clarity, being clear on what you mean by this term, objectivism. and also an issue of acknowledgement or giving due credits, not plagiarizing, not trying to pass off so, as your own somebody else's ideas.
Well, it's not wrong to think that Ayn Rand might have made a mistake in some, you know, further down the line. There might be something that she got wrong, and that, if somebody came along and fixed that, would you, are you still going to say, well, that's, even though Ayn Rand got that wrong, and yes, if you, because I take objectivism to be a philosophy that believes in, or I shouldn't say believes, but a philosophy of the primacy of existence. And I think with the primacy of existence, you should be able to get everything that Ayn Rand developed, right? If you do start with existence exists, then everything comes naturally, and Ayn Rand showed that. But I do think she, if she did make a mistake, which Ayn Rand said, we're not Aquinas' angels, I think it would be wrong to be, if you're going to say, okay, that's not objectivism, that's what's his name, David Kelly's philosophy, then objectivism is just going to eventually decay, right? If new things are being proven and objectivism won't grab those in and take those, then they're just becoming like a subjectivist in a sense.
If new things aren't incorporated, well, I don't think they have to be incorporated to be used. I mean, I think our goal fundamentally should be the truth.
Right.
And so if you think that there's something mistaken about objectivism, then I would say don't follow objectivism. Follow this other thing that you think is true, but don't call it objectivism because that's confusing. And I think that's passing off as Ayn Rand's ideas something that are not her ideas. So you ask about like what if something is found in the future to be mistaken. I tried to sort of address that in my initial comments. Like the issue is not whether it's true or false. The issue is whether it's Ayn Rand's philosophy. So if you find something about her philosophy that you think is incorrect, I would say then you shouldn't follow her philosophy, at least that aspect of it. Maybe there's other aspects, but at least if it's something substantial that you think is wrong about it, I would say, well, don't follow that. Go with whatever you think is true, but then just be clear that that's not objectivism.
I guess it just strikes me interesting that like through history we've had idealism and rationalism and objectivism, and then you find out that rationalism isn't really rational, and if objectivism turns out that it's not actually objective because there is a mistake, then I don't see why we couldn't just have objectivism be this open system instead of Ayn Rand's, and keep, make it if there is something that becomes true, okay, objectivism understands that and grabs it on. I mean, I do understand, you wouldn't call it Aristotelianism anymore, but I feel like Ayn Rand called it objectivism not because she wanted it to be Aristotelianism, because then she would have picked the name Randism. Maybe she picked objectivism because she wanted it to be, okay, this is, well, she obviously did, right? You're not going to make a philosophy and say this, isn't the right one, but this is objectivism. This is what will always be, the correct philosophy. If I haven't filled the gaps on anything, then they need to, because she didn't finish everything, right? The Romantic Manifesto is about art or aesthetics, but she only goes, she's only one person. She doesn't have she's not omniscient, right? She can't fill in the objectivism philosophy. So people do need to add to it. And let's say I wanted to write a book on rock and roll music and how that's objective, which Ayn Rand probably didn't like. But are you then going to say, well, even though it conforms exactly to objectivism, you're going to have to name it something else? Which, if that's the answer, that's the answer on whatever. But it just seems like a way, like when I hear about, when I watch these videos on objectivists like Yaron Brook and I know Peikoff's out of it, but there's Leibowitz is in it and Jim Fallon and all these people. Like it just seems like they're, I don't know if they're able to get the new generation this way. I don't know if they're not very open. I guess that's obviously the thing, right? They're not, are they gonna, I don't know.
Well, so you've raised another issue, which is completeness. So
Mm-hmm.
that's also another aspect of this, which I don't think is relevant to uh, whether something should be called objectivism. So Ayn Rand is not omniscient, as you indicated. She didn't comment on everything, um, but uh, I mean, you could say there's something incomplete about her philosophy. Like there's certain issues, like the problem of induction,
Mm-hmm.
which she didn't address, at least to the extent that I think it would have to be addressed to say like this philosophy offers a solution to the problem of induction. I think she actually says something like that in the appendix of her book, Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology. This issue of induction comes up, and she talks about how you would need to do such and such in order to have an answer, but she doesn't put forth her own answer. So I think this is an area where you could say that objectivism is incomplete as a philosophy. There's like some important issue that it doesn't offer a solution to.
Mm-hmm.
But if you then, in Leonard Peikoff, her students for many decades, he eventually did offer a solution, but I wouldn't say that his solution is part of objectivism. Maybe it's true, maybe it's consistent with objectivism, but I wouldn't say it's part of objectivism. I mean, we can't speak for Ayn Rand, so we don't know what she would have thought of the theory. But regardless of that, I don't think because it wasn't part of her philosophy that she came up with herself or that she endorsed during her lifetime.
Right.
As I think for clarity, but also for acknowledgement reasons and plagiarist reasons. Um, well, maybe it's kind of plagiarist in reverse reasons, like to ascribe to her a view that Peikoff came up with would be taken away from Peikoff, the credits
Mm.
or the blame that should go along with whatever his theory, whatever merits or demerits his theory has. But it's not. There's an issue of properly crediting something, um, which I don't think should be obscured, but I think is obscured if we said something like Leonard Peikoff's theory of induction is part of objectivism. I don't think that would be right. So there may be other issues in addition to induction, which a complete philosophy would need to have, but that's a separate issue of whether, in my mind at least, it's a separate issue from whether it would be right to call it part of objectivism. There's another issue which ties into this. Another point I want to make, which is that objectivism is a proper name or a proper noun, which is why it has a capital letter at the beginning of it. The capital O, it means it's referring to a specific body of ideas or knowledge, the ones that Ayn Rand came up with. Now, I have seen the term objectivism with a lowercase o used. In that case, it's not a proper name or a proper noun. It's just a common or maybe abstract noun. In there, I think there is more flexibility in whether you call something objectivism. Um, so you mentioned like if something is found to be not objective, then do we have to continue calling it objectivism?
Right.
Well, I guess I would say, just thinking off the top of my head about that right now, I would say yes and no. So if we're talking about, like, say something in Ayn Rand's philosophy that you think is not objective in the lowercase sense of objective,
Mm-hmm.
then I would say I guess what should be said about that is part of objectivism with the uppercase O is non-objective, and there's no contradiction there,
Hmm.
um, because you're talking about different things, something with a different standard. Your standard of whether something is objective with a lowercase o is not the standard for whether something is objectivism with the uppercase O. The standard for the latter, as I think of it, is just whether it's part of Ayn Rand's philosophy.
I see. I see. Yeah.
So there's no like bar to like we can never we're barred from having an objective philosophy because you can never say that something is part of Ayn Rand's philosophy unless she came up with it. So if we decide that part of her philosophy is not objective,
Yeah.
then I guess you could call it objectivism in the lowercase o sense, but it just wouldn't be
Yeah.
part of her philosophy. So.
Yeah. Because like if I told somebody like Yaron Brook that I'm an objectivist, but I disagree on X, Y, and Z, that his first response is, "You're not a real objectivist," and
It,
I
in
see
the
it.
uppercase sense, at
Yeah,
least.
in the uppercase, right? But I consider, okay, in the lower, right, in the lowercase, no, this is, if I think if Ayn Rand understood this, she would have included it, if she, but I see. What is, I guess my other question is there anything that you disagree with towards uppercase objectivism?
I have a video exactly like on this question on my channel. I
Oh, okay.
titled it "Do you have any disagreements with objectivism?" And um, in that video, I say I'm not sure, but I do have questions about a couple things.
Mm-hmm.
So one is uh, the view of hedonism, like what should be the top value someone pursues? Is it pleasure, happiness, life?
Like psychological hedonism, I see. Yeah.
Well, that's psychological hedonism would be the view that people always and automatically pursue pleasure, so it's a deterministic kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
And that's a bit different than what I'm talking about. It would be more ethical hedonism, the idea that people should, maybe they don't, but they should pursue pleasure as their highest aim, or maybe it could be put in terms of happiness. People should pursue happiness as their highest aim. And she says certain things too that suggests this, like in her about the author, uh, like the 1 or 2 pages that I think it's titled about the author at the end of Atlas Shrugged. She says, "My philosophy in essence is the idea of man as a heroic being with productive achievement as his noblest activity and his own happiness as his highest moral purpose," something like that. I don't know if I got the
Mm-hmm,
words
mm-hmm.
exactly right, but if you're saying happiness is the highest moral purpose, then that might be something that a hedonist could agree with, at least if you understand hedonism in a certain way. Now, I'm not a scholar of hedonism. I have read someone's dissertation on this sort of issue, though. Someone who's, I think, been heavily influenced by Rand, and he argues that Rand's view, at least I think in certain passages, is compatible with hedonism if you understand hedonism in a certain way, not as just whim worship, which Ayn
Right.
Rand is definitely against.
Right,
She
right.
makes that very clear. But if you're not understanding hedonism to mean that, if you're just understanding it as a view of what is the ultimate value, then maybe in the hedonist says the ultimate value is your own happiness or pleasure, then maybe that is consistent with what Rand says. Now, she also says life is the ultimate
Yeah,
value,
right.
but exactly how you integrate those things, like sometimes people will say, well, it's just two different perspectives on the same kind of thing. Really
Yeah.
happy, pursuing happiness and pursuing life, they amount to the same thing. One is just from a more psychological perspective, what the goal is, that is happiness, and the other is more of an existential kind of perspective. It doesn't abstract out.
Well, couldn't you say happiness is the emotion that you get when achieving your values?
Well, that is
So,
what Rand says in a certain place. Um, Forget the exact words, but it's something very much like that. So I don't know if I really have any disagreement with her on that, but I just have a question, at least sometimes,
Yeah, I see.
as to whether she would see the role of happiness or the nature of hedonism in the same way that I do. And I've gone into more detail about this in previous videos. So
Yeah, I'll have to watch that one.
if you just, I guess you can search for hedonism on my channel and it'll turn
Yeah.
up some videos. But that's one issue. Again, not maybe not a disagreement, but just something I wondered about.
I, I have a question similar. I don't want to take up too much of your time if this is a, I don't want to hog the
Well, there's nobody else
microphone.
trying to call in right now, and I don't see much going on in the chat room, so
Okay.
feel free
So
to stick around.
I have a question that I've been struggling with about so in specifically in OPAR, well, I guess I shouldn't say specifically because it's in objectivism anyways, but it's about if life is your ultimate value, um, then under no circumstances could you kill yourself. But many times Peikoff has talked about where suicide is, there are situations in which suicide is okay, which I don't want to, that's not my question because I don't really agree with that, but I haven't gone deep in that. But the specific question is about sacrificing your life to others. And I know the word sacrifice, I just want to clarify in OPAR, they talk about, I mean, it's really just one paragraph. I could get the book, but he does say that, this doesn't mean that you shouldn't, sacrifice your life for a loved one if the situation comes up. And then he says, in fact, that would be something you should do. And I sort of see the reasoning as in like the way I interpret it is I have, and maybe this is wrong, but I have a life and I will eventually die. And it's sort of like I know I can't reify death, but the time I want to die is in my own hands. So can I value jumping in front of a bullet, let's say, to save my, my wife? But I know my wife isn't my ultimate value. So am I sacrificing my ultimate value? I'm not very sure on how to sort of come up with this right answer.
Well, I guess my thought on this is you're not sacrificing, not necessarily sacrificing your life. I guess it depends on whether you value your wife. I mean,
But you,
hopefully you do, and
but
that's
you,
why
but you
you
can't value your wife more than your life, right?
uh yeah, not as an end in itself, but she's part of your life, and your
Right.
life might not be worth living without her. So you might be more miserable without your wife. Your life might be more miserable without your wife than with her. Sorry, did I say that right? It
I
could be
think
more miserable without your wife
I guess it
than
depends if I love my wife.
yeah. But so
Right. Yeah. I
what I'm trying to
understand what
say
you're
is
saying.
you would you at least could you could prefer rationally to not live rather than live without her.
It's it it's kind of like the whole like, okay, you're on your deathbed and the devil comes up to you and he offers you, hey, if you kill the woman next to you, I'll let you live for 100 more years. But by killing the woman next to me, I've already basically died because I am killing my life. This isn't how I want to live. So I see that there. But, I sort of see it as like an epistemological problem where like, and maybe I'm rationalizing this as a epistemological problem, but I'm saying like, okay, in this hypothetical that I'm jumping in front of the bullet, I don't know that the bullet's going to kill me, but I do know if I don't jump in front of the bullet, even if it were to say miss my wife or whatever, it could be anything. I would be choosing a bad value. I would be quote unquote dying, right? Doing an evil act, which an evil act leads to death. So that's how I see it. But I still am not sure. Like, I understand completely the idea that like, okay, your wife is she's important to your life, and you would be, you're quote unquote dying if you don't jump in front of the bullet. But it's kind of like, if you're on your deathbed, not on your deathbed, let's say you're sick or whatever, and you may be dying or whatever. Is it right to kill yourself to end your suffering? And you're saying, okay, life isn't worth living anymore. This life isn't worth living. But your your only your only ability to value is based on your life. So how could you possibly say that like values don't exist without your life? It's only your life that gives you values. I don't know. It's I feel like in Opar he only goes over it for a paragraph. It seems to me like this should be a more, maybe I'm overthinking it because I think I should jump in front of the bullet, but if it is really my top values, my life, then I really shouldn't. So it is. I'm because I know. Let's say my wife is the second most important thing. Yes, my life would be down and like you know I would be suffering, but that doesn't mean that I couldn't gain more values later on by having a life. Like this is going to sound bad, but maybe by not jumping in front of the bullet, I could have another wife or, you know, watch my kids. I don't know.
I guess you just have to decide what's going to be in your long-term self-interest, and it might not be obvious immediately in a particular case, but um, I think it's important to understand that by life, the kind of life worth living, um, it's not just cellular metabolism. It's life of a certain kind. Um, so it's life qua rational being. That phrase is sometimes used in at
Mm,
Objectivism, or life qua man, as opposed to uh, as an animal, like living as a brute. That's uh, the contrast that um, Rand sometimes uses, like in the Virtue of Selfishness. She contrasts life as a rational being with life as a brute, where you're just raping, robbing, pillaging, that sort of distortion, she would say, of what an egoist's or selfish person's life actually looks like. So, if you hold as your standard of value life qua rational being, or life qua flourishing human being, then a certain conception of life is kind of baked in to what the standard is.
I
It's not just,
I see. So I see what you're saying. So if it was life qua life, then yes, it would be just the biological process that is keeping me alive. So therefore, I would.
um, well, I mean, life is an abstraction from, I mean, I think it sounds like you're basically agreeing with what I was saying there, but
Yeah, I
um,
am. Yeah.
life is an abstraction from particular lives. So we observe this beaver living in a certain way and this dog living in a certain way. Um, and I guess life for the life that's appropriate to any particular organism is going to depend on its nature. So
Hmm.
a good life for a bird is going to involve flying, whereas a good life for a human being is not going to involve flying. So if we consider what is the um, proper life for any particular organism, that's going to that's going to provide a standard for evaluating a
Yeah.
certain life as good or bad. But I think for any case, unless you're like a amoeba or something, maybe for that sort of life, all you need is cellular metabolism to
Right.
keep you in existence. But for more advanced, higher sort of life forms like human beings, there's much more that goes into the life of that sort of being than just cellular metabolism. So it's going to involve things like living by certain virtues, honesty, integrity, productiveness, etc. For human beings. It's going to involve having relationships with other people, romantic relationships, friendships, All of
Right,
these
right.
things go into the proper sort of life for a human being, without which it's not worth living. Then you're not living as a human being. You might be living as an amoeba if all you're doing now is cellular metabolism,
Or
unconscious on a deathbed,
or
but you're
you
not
might
living
be,
qua human being.
I see, or you might be living as a brute if you just okay. No, that definitely elucidated it because I see my error. I was thinking, life qua life, but yeah, if it's life qua, I think I understand it, but now I have even further questions. But that does help. Yeah, I get that. Life qua rational being. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. This is discussed in, I think, in various places in the objectivist literature. So if you're interested in this issue and want to look more into it, I think in I was just thinking the companion to Ayn Rand probably has some discussion of this. It's an academic book edited by Alan Gotthelf and Greg Salmieri. I think there's some discussion of this in there. And also in the objectivist ethics, there's maybe not as much, but there's at least a little bit in that essay on this sort of issue. And in OPAR, there's some more. There might be some other places as well. But anyways, yeah, there's some various resources people can look up.
Yeah, it's hard to go through the extensive bibliography of objectivism. So I'm working my way. Just sometimes, you don't want to learn about aesthetics, and then you do, and then you want to do ethics, and so it's a lot of jumping around. But that's how it is.
When did you first read Ayn Rand?
So, well, funny enough, I read when I was a high schooler, we had to read Anthem, and I didn't like reading anyway, so I didn't really get into it. I didn't think anything of it. And then about in 2022, I had sort of a moment where I had to, I sort of had like a existential crisis. So I went through like basically the big one was Stoicism, and I was sort of agreeing with it, but I have libertarian roots anyways, like very libertarian. Uh, so there's sort of things that led to Ayn Rand, Milton Friedman and Austrian economics and all this stuff. So eventually I read Fountainhead, and I didn't actually know anything about Ayn Rand's philosophy at the time. I knew that she had a philosophy, but I didn't know anything about it. And I really liked the Fountainhead. And then I probably watched Peikoff's History of Philosophy, and that got me into that. And then I read Shrugged. So that was, I read Fountainhead probably 2 years ago, and then Atlas Shrugged a year ago. I finished OPAR probably 4 months ago, 3 months, probably 3 months. So and then I'm working through the different ideas. Well, so I guess I should mention my big deviation is that I'm an anarchist, an anarcho-capitalist specifically, and a lot of that stems from the idea that I'm a libertarian, and then the logical, maybe not logical, but if you take libertarian to its full extent, then you have to get rid of the gut. Even minarchism just doesn't hold. I'd be fine with Ayn Rand's minarchism, which is complete. If you could have a government that's completely funded by voluntary taxes, because that's all I care about. All I care about is voluntary. Just I shouldn't say that's all I care about, but that's the important thing, right? It has to be voluntary. Just like Ayn Rand says, there's the initiation of force is, the evil, right? That's the one, bad thing that you can possibly do to another. And I agree with that completely. I just think that I feel like Ayn Rand freezes the abstraction of politics as a branch of philosophy. They sort of go, okay, we have metaphysics, we have epistemology, we have ethics. Ethics tells us how humans or how man should act. And then then she goes, okay, now we have politics. This is the branch that says how should man act socially, or how should a government form? And I feel like that's freezing the abstraction. To me, politics should be a branch of ethics, and then we should decide, okay, if man should live this way, do we need a government? Or should we have a government? I guess not need. Should we have a government? And then, if we should have a government, what form of government? I feel like by freezing the abstraction as a branch of philosophy, they're sort of pushing government onto us. And I think Ayn Rand hated anarchism. I don't think she did. She definitely hated anarchism. And I think a lot of that stemmed from the idea that obviously she didn't like Mises or whatever, but anarchism back then was very much social anarchism, anarcho-socialism, or anarcho-capitalism, which to me is a complete contradiction. But now we have different forms we have anarcho-capitalism, which to me, I feel like if Ayn Rand, well, maybe I should stop. I don't want to quote or talk about her, but it just seems to me like anarchism, anarcho-capitalism can work and does work with objectivism. I think law, Ayn Rand talks about how like the law needs to be made objective. Somebody needs to come down and make the law objective. But I don't think you need to make things don't need to be made objective. Things just are objective. Like if there is a natural law, a deontological natural law, then it should just be able to be found. I should be able to go outside and find natural law, just like I can find 2+2 or primacy of existence or any of that. So I don't think we need an authority to come down and say, no, this is the law. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't eat that, not even should, because then it becomes ethical. But okay, we're going to throw you in jail because you did this, or we're going to tax you because we need to do this. And that's just the problem. And I think, for somebody that's so, I know I'm kind of rambling on, but for somebody that's so collectivist or anti-collectivist as Ayn Rand is and objectivists are, it seems like they're okay to sort of take in a little bit of a collectivist idea when it comes to government. For example, Leonard Peikoff, he's a sort of like a war hawk. There's that video of him with, is it Bill O'Reilly or somebody, where he's talking about basically glassing the Middle East during, the early 2000s during the war. He said it's the Americans' moral duty to destroy their enemies. And then they talk about how, well, what about all the innocent children? And Ayn Rand says those people aren't innocent. They're part of the problem. And to me, that just sounds like collectivism. And I guess that's where I have my problem. I'm not a great debater, so I'm not, that wasn't my purpose, but I'm more of just trying to get your kind of take on it. And
Yeah, sure. So there's a lot of issues that came up. So let me say something about well, just a quick comment on Mises, because I think you brought up him very quickly in passing. Ayn Rand, I think, was very favorable toward Mises as an economist. Now, I do think she disagreed with him very strongly on deeper issues like in ethics and philosophy.
He snuck in Kant a little bit.
I actually am not very familiar with Mises myself, but what I do know is that, like, in her book Capitalism: The Unknown Ideal, he's cited more than anybody else. And I think like 8 of his works are referenced in the bibliography, but I think she's primarily favorable towards him as an economist, not as a philosopher or as a ethicist. So I just wanted to make that point about Mises. But I guess the bigger issue, or the one you were talking more about, is just anarchism. And so that it's something like anarcho-capitalism, or recently I heard the term anarcho-objectivism.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think those are consistent. Like, I don't think anarchy is consistent with objectivism. Well, certainly not, because, and this kind of ties back into the earlier part of our conversation. Is if something is, this is not even a case where it's like just an additional thing. It's like actually in contradiction to what Ayn Rand has explicitly said.
Right.
So you certainly can't be an objectivist if you're in favor of anarchy. And I think also capitalism, I think the term anarcho-capitalism is kind of an oxymoron, because I don't think you can have capitalism uh, if that means a system in which individual rights are respected. I don't think you can have that without government. So you need government for capitalism, which means there can't be such a thing as anarcho-capitalism. But I mean, maybe that's something we could discuss more. I actually don't have many debates or discussions on my channel. I don't know if I have any actually on the topic of anarchism itself. It's something I'd like to um, think and chat more about. Maybe this is a good time to start it. Um,
Well, I'm not much of a debater, but we can talk.
yeah,
I'm happy
yeah,
to talk. I guess to answer your question about, well, so like the idea that in objectivism is the idea that like you need some final arbiter to pass judgment. Like, so you know who's going to protect our rights if we don't have some final top person that says, okay, you know, if A commits a crime against B, we need that final person that we've all given power to say, okay, it is true that A committed an aggression on B, problem solved, or then we solve the problem. But I don't really see how that's necessary. First of all, I think that leads to a problem where, okay, if then you're really just limiting it to geographical location, because at that point, why don't we need a world government? Like if if America attacks Canada, who's the arbiter to say that that was objectively wrong? Because do we go to the UN? Like, do we need a world government? And then what if we have multiple planets and then one planet attacks another planet? Do we need a planetary government? I just feel like this sort of, I mean, I understand you could say, oh, it just goes on ad infinitum or whatever, but okay, it seems like that's sort of not very practical. Whether or not it's possible is fine, but like just doesn't seem like it's happening. Like, but any case, and then the other problem is I think it's only individuals can protect their own rights. I don't think I need a government to protect. I don't think I need a government to be forced on me to protect my rights. I don't see why I couldn't choose to pay somebody to protect my rights. You know, why can't I pay what they call REAs, which are rights enforcement agencies? That's the idea in anarcho-capitalism. You know, why can't I have a rights enforcement agency that protects my rights, and then they go to court, and then there's a legal system that just uses natural law? Because at the end of the day, if the government is using natural law to choose who's the winner or the loser, then that's perfectly fine. Then it's all objective, it's all squared, everyone's happy. But if the government doesn't use natural law, if they're just using positive law, or if they're being lobbied, or if they're being paid off, or whatever, then we just run into this problem where the government isn't objective. And I feel like you're going to have that problem with the government. Is if the government doesn't follow natural laws, then it doesn't work. And plus, if they're forcing people to do stuff, like, I mean, you know, I don't see how Ayn Rand's voluntary government could ever work. Like, the government has to make money. You know, I just don't know if it would ever, be able to do something without using force. I don't know.
all right, so I got some thoughts on that, and also I see Matt T has entered the waiting room, so it looks like he might also want to come on. So maybe I'll address this last segment, and
Yeah.
then if Matt is still here in the waiting room, then I can take his call next.
Yeah.
But so here's some thoughts. One is you as an individual are still the final arbiter in a sense, at least. Um, and I was thinking to the American Revolution. So if a government becomes so oppressive, um, at a certain point, you can just decide, and this is what, the American revolutionaries did. And I don't know if you would want to say they were appealing to natural law or what you would call it, the rights of man, but they had an idea that there are certain rights. They were heavily influenced by John Locke.
Right.
And there's this famous phrase in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal with the inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Hmm.
And they saw the British government as infringing on those rights, and they eventually decided, it's worth rebelling. So they were taking their own view of rights and applying it. So ultimately, you as an individual have to decide what is right, and so I think egoism is still operative there. Like if you think that some government is violating your rights, it's not, you don't have a duty to just do whatever the government tells you no matter what and just follow it uh, into a furnace place, right? And just if it tells you, go off to the gas chambers or something, and you just have to dutifully
Hmm.
follow it. Um, Not on an egoist ethics. Maybe if you follow a self-sacrificial or altruist ethics, you would
Hmm.
feel you have a duty to just do whatever somebody else tells you to do. But if you hold an egoist ethics, as Ayn Rand does, then you have to consider, what is in your self-interest, and it might come to a point where the government in the jurisdiction you live under is just so corrupt that egoism requires you to go against that government and start a revolution.
Right.
Um, so these are some thoughts that came to mind as you were talking about, like, who is the final authority or arbiter. Um, and I think in a way, it's always you. It's always the individual, and
Right. Right.
you have to decide. Is this just a minor thing? Like maybe I'm taxed at 0.1% or something, and it's not worth starting a rebellion over that. But it is worth starting a rebellion if the government takes away 99% of my income, or maybe if it abolishes all private property and is a communist government. Um, and I guess one could debate exactly what is the appropriate point of oppression to just throw off the government entirely, and maybe people have different views on that. But I think it's reasonable to think that at some point, at least, it's no longer um, reasonable to abide by whatever some government authority is telling you.
Right.
So I think I'm just looking here. I made a few notes. If there's anything else I want to say, it look like, oh, Mark is no longer in the waiting room. So maybe I
Mhm.
won't try to, I won't go to his, well, Mark, if you want to, feel free to just let me know in the chat, Mark, or if you want to come back, you can call back in. But I'm just gonna, if you don't do that, I'm just gonna stick on here with oh no's 117 as long as he wants to be here or until I get tired. I guess you can't see his name because I think on my, let's see, on the phone here it only shows me. So I guess I have tried to change this to gallery view so you can see me and anyone else who's on this Zoom call. So I don't know why it's not showing at least like a empty box for him. But in any case, it looks like only I'm showing up. So anyways, his name shows up here as oh no's OH_NOES 117. So I'll call him that. Um, all right. So I was just looking back at my notes to see if there's anything. Oh yeah, so I guess related to this, the point that only individuals can protect their rights, or you said something about that. So I just wanted to make the point that in in a um, in a rational society, I think it makes sense to delegate your right of self-defense
Correct,
to the
correct.
government. So you're not
Oh,
like a vigilante who has to take the law into his own hands.
right.
But in a case of emergency, you have the right to self-defense. So if there's no time to call on the police, on the government agent to come help you out, then you have the right to self-defense, and you can own a weapon and use that in your own defense. So
Well,
again, it's the individual as the arbiter deciding what is in his own self-interest. But that doesn't mean just do whatever you feel like whimsically. Um, but if you think about it and rationally, you decide, well, there's nobody here who can protect my rights. There's just not enough time. There's some guy, knocking on my door, or he's broken into my house or something. Well, I got to defend myself now. There's no time.
but we have governments that are trying to take away that right or dilute it. There are like I assume you live in America too, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Like there are plenty of places where they make it extremely hard to defend yourself. Or, you always hear stories or jokes about how if somebody breaks into your house, you better make sure they're dead because they're gonna win the court case. They're gonna they're gonna win. And they're gonna find everything. Oh, maybe you shouldn't have. Are you sure you should have killed them? Maybe you should have let them, I'll try not. I won't say anything bad, but maybe you should have let them have your kids or let them kidnap or whatever. It's, but a lot of that comes down to John Rawls, ruining the justice system and the philosophy of law. But so we don't really need to get into that. There are problems, but I'm just wondering if you did base it completely on natural law and just looked at it as like, okay, he did self defense. He's allowed to commit any act of self defense that I shouldn't say that, but we would still need a judge. We would still have a legal system, but the legal system wouldn't be controlled by the government. It wouldn't be the judges wouldn't be enacting positive laws that the legislation voted on. They would instead be enacting natural laws that have just been discovered, that are just out there, right? That, okay, I'm a judge. I see that A attacked B and B defended his life. I don't need to go, oh, wait, B's not allowed to own a weapon because our legislation of California voted that weapons are bad, and only bad guys have weapons. So actually, B did not defend himself. B's going to jail for the rest of his life for murder, right? It just seems like there's always going to be this problem. Or you have the opposite, where it's, oh, A attacked B because he needed food, so A wanted to steal the wallet from B. Well, A has the right to food, right? Right? Don't they have economic rights or collective rights or whatever? So we voted on this. We've allowed this in society. So I'm going to just do what is societally right. That's my judgment as the judge. I'm not going to look out to existence and find natural law. I'm just going to say what people want. I don't want to. That's just what it seems like it happens when you have a government controlling the legal system. I,
okay. Uh, I feel a little. I'm not sure what to say, but um, I guess you're. I mean, there's always going to be an issue of individual judgment, like even in an anarchist, if you're in anarchy, you have individuals deciding for themselves how to how to act, when to use force, and um, because what is the difference between that and a system that Ayn Rand advocates, where you have a government I mean, it's still you still have individuals deciding on things, but I guess in a way, it's maybe it's indirect in how it's done. Like it's not just left up to every individual to decide for himself. You have people who are experts, to go back to that topic, which came up earlier in the stream, maybe before you were on, but you have judges and
Mhm.
lawyers who are versed in the law, who are drawing on um, precedents, and a legal system has developed over time, over centuries, and over time, uh, it's been found that certain laws make sense. Certain, I guess sometimes they decide laws don't make sense, and then they repeal
But
laws like slavery. Right? It was decided that we have to abolish slavery because that's not consistent with our fundamental principles that all men are created equal and have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
right, but slavery, that example you give is a failure of government. The government did not look at natural law, which shows that slavery is wrong, and they decided to make laws accepting slavery. Slavery is a failure of government. Slavery would never exist
Well, I
under a
mean,
natural law theory, because you
I
would
don't know
say,
that I would say it's a slavery of it's a failure of government, because I mean you could enslave someone as an individual. Like let's say you're on a deserted island, it's just you and one other
right,
person,
okay, but
and you can decide, how am I going to interact with this other person? Am I going to make him a slave? Am I going to try to tie him up and tell
right,
him what to do?
and we would
Or
we would both say that's wrong. But if the government comes along and does it, then people say, oh, well, the government makes the laws, therefore it's okay. Just like it's right for me to, it's not
Well,
right.
no, I mean, we could say the government has made these laws, but it's not okay. So I'm going to try to rebel against this government and maybe overthrow it
Right. But I mean, like you mentioned,
and establish a different kind of government.
well, yeah, there's the problem, right? Like even Rousseau said that eventually, at some point, all governments become evil, and you have to overthrow them. So it's just
Well,
a
I don't see why that's the case. Like why I don't see that it's necessary that a government
well.
becomes evil if
Well,
that
let
means like it violates people's rights by initiating force against people.
well,
If you have a philosophy, and I think this is part of how you get a good government, is you have to spread the right philosophy. That's what part of what I'm trying to do with this channel. I'm trying to spread Ayn Rand's whole philosophy of objectivism, and I think that has implications for the right type of governmental system. But ultimately, I don't think you can have the right sort of system of government if you don't have the right philosophy to uphold it.
I guess what's stopping a government to let's say all we had a direct democracy and we voted for all our laws, right? Let's say a majority, if you vote a majority rules 51%, a law gets passed. What's stopping a society like the South to say the South during slavery to say, okay, 51% votes that slavery is morally correct. There's nothing to stop that. The government has to abide because it's the government of the people, right? It's not a government of natural law. If we had a government of natural law, they would say, whoa, 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 that doesn't work. But they don't because it's a government of people. But I'm saying why have that government if they could just ignore natural law? We could vote to ignore. I mean, take the example of the people on the island. If there's 3 people on the island and they start a government and then they do the first vote and it says, okay, the 2 of us get everything and you're our slave. Under a government system, that's perfectly reasonable. We can both agree that disagrees with natural law, but they don't care. If they can now use force to handle that situation. And even if a judge, even if they had a judicial system that was based on that government, let's say the 4th person's a judge, he would say, Yeah, I'm looking at the law, and this is within the books. You guys voted on the ability to enslave this guy. So it just seems like you, I shouldn't say seems, it just is, right? Like I'm not allowed to steal from you, right? But the government is allowed to steal from me 24/7. We, now I think we both agree that that's wrong. But that doesn't stop them from throwing me, that doesn't stop them from initiating force on me if I refuse to pay them.
Okay, let me I want to answer that or reply to some of this, but I just want to take a quick look at the chat and see if, because I see a few messages have come in. I want to see if there's anything there I want to reply to first. So there's at let's see. Oh, it looks like so there's a message from Mark Thomas who says no world government, negative rights first. And then he was the one who tried to call in, but then I guess maybe he had to go. He had a different screen name on Zoom. And then Hree says slavery existed in places where there wasn't any government. And then another one from Hree, he says the chance people would vote for slavery being legal are very low. Okay, so that's the last chat I see. By the way, thanks for being here. For anyone who's watching the stream, I see there's some people. There's 5 right now, according to my phone. If you are here and you're liking the stream, I would appreciate a like, a thumbs up. That'll help promote it in the algorithm. And if you subscribe, that would also be great. Help grow the channel. All right. So, continuing here with what was it? No, oh no's 117. Um, so, by the way, I mean, let's see how I've been going on for almost 2 hours now, and I don't have like a hard cutoff or anything. I don't know if you do, but I can go for at least a bit longer.
Mm-hmm,
I might need to like take a snack break at some point, but for now
mm-hmm.
I'm okay. Um,
I
so
guess.
let me see if I can. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to talk about those two comments that came in. I mean, I think.
Oh, well, let me say something before you
Okay,
do that,
go
and then
ahead.
then you can. Okay, so um, one point I was going to make is um, it has to be decided, I guess, at the beginning of when you're establishing a society, what kind of principles we're going to have governing it. Like, is it going to be the rule that we vote on things by direct democracy and whatever a majority wants goes? Like, so if 51% vote to enslave the other 49%, then that's going to be the kind of society we have. I don't think that's the right sort of society. So if we're setting up society, I don't think the right way to do it is to just have everything be subject to a vote. There are certain things which I don't think should be subject to a vote, um, like rights to life or rights to property. I don't think those should be up for debates. Uh, so if a society has votes on those sorts of things, then I think there's a problem with it, and in the long run, I guess the problems will become worse if they don't become corrected, um, or they could become better if they are corrected. Like with slavery, it was started out that U.S. had this problem, but then um, it wasn't able to last in the long run. Things got worse, and eventually led to a civil war, and then they got rid of the problem. But anyways, my point is just like there are some preconditions of having a good society. One of which I think is not making it unlimited democracy or mob rule wherever whatever the majority wants goes. So if you don't set society up like that, if you do have unlimited democracy, then there are going to be problems that I don't think there's any way to avoid that unless you know, revisit that fundamental principle of the society and say, no, the fundamental principle is going to be we protect individual rights, which means people can't initiate force against each other. And we're not going to even open it up to a vote whether we have something like taxes or slavery, because those violate our fundamental principle. But if you have that fundamental principle in place of individual rights, then I think the society can work. Or at least, you know, maybe there are some other conditions you need as well, but that's at least one minimal condition of a society to work, I would say.
I guess my fear is, our founding fathers set out to do just what you said, and it's uh, it doesn't, every decade it just degrades and degrades and degrades. It's they set out to create the smallest government in the world, and now we're the biggest. And they've added amendments and they've retracted, and it's just I
Well,
don't see.
let's acknowledge the good part. I mean, U.S. I mean, if you had to choose, like, what is the most successful society ever in history, I think the U.S. There's a good case to be made that it's done the best in history. So whatever problems there are, let's at least acknowledge. Or I don't
Yeah,
know what you would say, but I would
no,
say U.S. has done extremely well if you take a very broad scale, large scale view
yeah.
of things. Now, it hasn't lasted. I think it is true that the government has grown over time and things have gotten worse in some ways, better in other ways. But I think economic freedom has diminished a lot over the last century,
Mhm.
with the growth of the welfare state and
Right,
FDR's New Deal and Lyndon
absolutely.
Johnson's so-called Great Society. But I think part of the reason for this is because of bad philosophy. And this, so going, that ties into an earlier point I was making. I don't think you can sustain a good political system if you don't have the right philosophy to undergird it. And I think German philosophy, uh, from Kant and going forward to Hegel and Marx, has had a large influence on America, and they're still having an influence. And I think if we don't uproot that influence and go back to, pre-Kantian philosophy, which was more pro-reason, and more pro-individualism, um, then we're going to continue to, things are going to continue to get worse. So I think we need to uh, revive a more rational philosophy, um, to get the country back on a better track. And that, I think, Ayn Rand's philosophy is really the key there. That, I think, that is the philosophy people need. It provides an entire view of metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics, which undergirds the philosophy of freedom and capitalism that I think we need to have a thriving, successful country.
I agree with you completely. I agree. Like, well, the founding fathers are heroes to me. So you know, you won't hear me bad mouthing them very much. But I kind of feel like like you mentioned, obviously the philosophy is important uh, to the time, the zeitgeist or whatever. But in as far back as we can go, every philosophy that has ever been established, there's always been a skeptic philosophy to counteract that. I say counteract. They don't really counteract. They just kind of, like Heraclitus, they eventually go into a corner and start mumbling or whatever. But I don't see even current day, like even if you were to give people the best, let's say it's objectivism, even if you were to solve objectivism or give them the best philosophy that is completely true and has no contradictions and completely solves every problem in existence, there's still going to be skeptics. Wouldn't you agree? There will always be a skeptic because with skepticism you can fall back on, well, not it's primacy of the conscience, right? You can fall back. You don't have to admit existence is real, and I think you will always have that problem. You will always have some person out there that says, "Oh wait, this is all in my head," and therefore, I'm not going to follow whatever laws you say, or I'm going to destroy them or denigrate them. Or I feel like even if you have the best, best laid plans, right? Event, 100 years later, who's to say, like our founding fathers, right? They tried to write an ironclad contract based on their philosophy, and even they couldn't follow it to the T because they still allowed slavery. They obviously had, they said inalienable rights, all humans under God, but they weren't counting Africans. Like that was clear in their intentions. Now, maybe in their writings they said, okay, maybe they knew they were doing something wrong, and it is possible. I do think it's likely that the founding fathers hoped that. I mean, even Thomas Jefferson talked about it, how they kind of hoped the slavery issue would just kind of eventually solve itself, and like it would, because any society that promotes life, any society that's Aristotelian-esque and natural law and objectivist-esque will eventually have to get rid of slavery. Not to mention that slavery is highly inefficient when you are competing against, for example, like the North versus the South. The South was not anywhere close to the ability of the North. They were just, but that's going on to slavery history, which we don't need to go into. But I guess, you kept mentioning, how do we form society? I don't see that we need to form society. I don't see that we need somebody to go, or a philosophy to say, hey guys, let's, this is our natural law. We're going to do this right and this right and this right, or this negative right, this negative right. And then everyone follows that and we'll be good. Why can't we just start from saying, okay, there's no government of any kind. We have natural laws, and we're just going to enforce those natural, like, I wouldn't say enforce, but that's, I mean, I guess you still need a philosophy to determine that natural laws are out there. But if you don't have a government, then even if somebody were to come by and say, oh, I don't believe in natural laws, then you are perfect. Then you can, use your natural laws, and they can't do anything against it, right? Like,
let me make some points, and then I think we got to wrap up because I feel like I'm getting I need some lunch soon. um, but just to make some points on that, so I don't think there's any determinism that's requiring that, like you say, there's always going to be skeptics or something, like whatever the system of government. Well, maybe. I think statistically it's possible. It's even likely that there's always going to be some people who don't agree with the dominant philosophy of the cultures, or there's not going to be unanimity. I don't expect there to be. I don't think there needs to be, though, in order to have a good society. Like I think the U.S. It wasn't there wasn't unanimity about the desire to break from Britain. Like some people were loyalists and they thought, we should just stay as a colony of Britain. Um, but maybe at a certain point that's debatable, right? Some people thought, there's like I was saying before, if you only have 0.01% taxes, maybe it's premature to rebel against the government. But if you have 99% taxes, then it's much more clear that it's appropriate that now we should rebel. So there can be some debate. Um, so not everyone is going to necessarily be on the same page about that, but that's not really an issue of philosophy. That's more of a kind of tactical, strategic issue. Like people might agree in principle that there should be private property rights and the government shouldn't take any of it, but they might have disagreements as to how much of a violation of property rights
right.
one should accept before one engages in a rebellion. But there's another aspect of this, which is like just people are irrational sometimes, and it's not
Yeah.
an issue of people have reasonable disagreements about where exactly do you draw the line of where it's appropriate to rebel, but some people are just irrational or dishonest, and I think there's an issue of free will there. It's I think whether you are trying to be honest and go by the facts, or just um, being dishonest and going by whatever you feel like, even if you sense it makes no rational sense. That's always going to be a possibility. And for every individual, no matter how virtuous or honest you've been in the past, you still have a choice about whether to be honest and stick to the facts in the future. Um, so I think it's always possible that there are irrational people in a society, but I don't think um, I think it's still the case that certain societies are better than others and are based on better principles than others. In certain societies, depending on the principles they adopt, can marginalize they can do a better job at marginalizing and making less relevant the fact that certain individuals are choosing to be irrational and dishonest. Like if you have a capitalist society where there's a profit motive and you can only make money if you produce a good product,
Yeah.
and sell it on the market. Well, then if you're irrational, if you're a racist or something, and you run a restaurant and you only sell food to white people, well, you're not going to get as much business as if you are more rational and
And
you
you're
sell
gonna
to
pay
anyone.
and you're gonna pay more for workers.
Yeah, so there's going to be free market forces that
Yeah.
marginalize and penalize people for irrationality. Um, So I think there is a way to not necessarily stamp out entirely, but at least minimize the damage of irrational forces in a society if you have the right founding principles. Um, so maybe I should just pause there, and I guess because I'm getting kind of low on energy here,
Mhm.
and but if you want to say any last thing here before we end this call, go ahead.
No, the thing on the life qua rational being was definitely very helpful. I've been thinking about that a lot ever since you said that. I'm like, okay, that makes a lot more sense, and I get that. So that thank you for elucidating that for me. But yeah, like I said, I'm not. I mean, I'm not a big debater, and I'm not a big. I think I'm more interested in. Well, I don't want to take your time, but I'm more of like a moralist. Ethics is more important to me than probably any of the other ones, which I think makes sense. But so like when I see, okay, we have this government, well, they're doing unethical things and we're allowing it. It's just that's how I see it. But I'm not
Mhm.
like completely, yeah, going to. There's just things that I think could be taken to their ultimate limit with the government, and I'm like, okay, why, take for example we even mentioned the Declaration of Independence isn't a binding contract, but the Constitution, I never signed the Constitution. That's just a social contract. Why should I have to follow the social contract? Would it be right to force a contract on your kids that they didn't sign or on anyone else? Like to me, that's not right. So to me, the Constitution is meaningless to me. I agree with a lot of the stuff in the Constitution, but I don't need the Second Amendment to tell me that I should be carrying a gun because it's dangerous in certain places or whatever. So that's just how I see it. But I know I won't take any more of your time. Um, I might, come back for another chat.
Yeah, sure.
I enjoyed this. I definitely have more objectivist questions that are um, you would probably like to hear. So or your
Yeah, sure.
viewers.
Well, thanks for calling in,
Mhm.
and I was glad we had to have this chat, especially because we covered some issues which I haven't covered much on my channel, and I'm glad to get some new material. But yeah, feel free to call back anytime.
Mhm. All right. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Bye bye. Alrighty. So that was good. We had a call, um, and it's the first time I think we had a call from someone who didn't show up in the chat before that. He went straight to the phone line or the Zoom line. That was nice. Um, just one thought on that last point he made about children. Like we don't have contracts with children. I think children are a different sort of case than adults. Like there are certain things that I think are appropriate to do with to like children. They kind of not exactly delegate their rights, but their rights are held in trust. I don't know what the right term to use is, but while they're still minors and they haven't developed their rational capacity or faculties yet, um, then I think it makes sense to for the parents to have a say over how their lives go in a way that doesn't make sense once they do reach maturity. Um, but that's another discussion. Maybe we can get into that more details in another call. But anyways, I think I need to get some lunch soon, so I'm going to wrap up the stream. I see one new person has come into the chat. Oh, actually, there's another comment here from Hree. He says, I don't know if I read this one before. The chance people would vote for slavery being legal are very low. And then he says, question, who decides what are the natural laws? And then, oh no, S, who is the new person in chat. Welcome, by the way. He says, nobody decides natural laws. They just exist, like the law of gravity or primacy of existence. The whole topic of natural laws, maybe that's something we should talk more about sometime, which I don't know that I don't think I have like a fully worked out opinion on them. Like, are there even such things at all as natural laws? Um, exactly what is meant by natural laws? Uh, are natural laws like the law of gravity, um, or something else? Maybe we should talk about that more on another live stream. And then Oh No S says, yeah, parents have guardianship over children's rights. I meant to explain that I was talking about heirs taking over their parents' contracts. Oh, this is the same person who was calling in. I see the name is similar enough. Not exactly the same, but it's similar enough now that it just made me realize, oh, this is the same person. Because he says I meant to explain, so he's referring to that clued me in that it's the same person. So he says, yeah, parents have guardianship over children's rights. I meant to explain that I was talking about heirs taking over their parents' contracts. Oh, so like if the parent has a certain obligation and then maybe that obligation is passed on to the people in their will. So if the parent owed $50,000 to somebody and hasn't paid it by the time they died, then if the children is left $50,000 in the will, then maybe the children are obligated to pay that $50,000 to discharge the debt to the person that the parent who just died owes the money to. Um, so, uh, yeah, maybe. Okay, so I guess he had something else in mind, maybe. Anyways, all right. So I'm going to end the stream, and thanks everyone for coming by. I'd appreciate it if you give the stream a like if you like the stream and you want to help the algorithm promote this channel. And also, I appreciate any subscriptions, help the channel grow. And I'm going to plan to do my next stream as usual on Saturday, roughly around the same time. And if you're subscribed, you should get a notification if you hit that bell of the exact time I go live. All right. Have a good week, everyone. And Hari, you said, okay, nice live, man. Bye. Thanks for coming by, Hari, and bye to you and everybody else. I'll see you in another live stream. Bye bye.